The DIESOL podcast,
Digital integration in English as a second or other language.
episode 45, Summer of SAMR, Modification.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 45. We are your hosts. I am Brent Warner.
And I'm Michelle Reyes. And this time my mic is not muted.
Oh, yay. So sometimes we have to go back and say, hey, let's unmute ourselves before we try and record. At least we didn't get too far in, right?
Yeah. How are you doing, Brent?
I am doing okay. So at the time this recording is coming out, I will be right in the middle of a mini vacation to the hottest place in America. So I'll be in Nevada over in, well, maybe it's not as hot as like Phoenix or something like that. But anyways, I'm going to be in a day in Vegas and a couple days in Laughlin. And I'm a little worried about it because those are some real anti-mask places, but we're shot up and should be okay. I guess I need to get my brain back into like, hey, I can hang out with other people mode. So
don't you go there often?
No, never.
Or just in that area? No, really? Ooh, can't wait to see what happens.
I haven't been there for probably 20 years, I guess. Las Vegas.
Oh wow.
I can't imagine.
Maybe it's Arizona I'm thinking of.
My wife does like Sedona, so we went there a couple years ago, but we haven't been back yet. We're gonna go again though. How about you? What are you up to?
I will by the time this episode comes out, I will be returning from California, from seeing my family. I get to see them for the weekend. Nice. So but it's better than not seeing them.
You're coming in when I'm taking off, right? So
yep.
We'll cross
I see
paths
you're
and
avoiding me.
Wave at each other. You can wave at me from the plane as I wave at you from the car. No, that's good. So I think we all need a little vacation time, a little time with our loved ones. And so,
yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that you're going to get some time with them. PD stuff, anything good going on?
I'm still on my hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
I just still need time. Yep. I still feel burnt out. Mm-hmm. How about you?
I do, again, this will be out. So I at the recording time, I'm just having finished the ISTE presentation, so that'll be good. And we're doing a little conversation with Tesol Hub, so that's kind of cool. And then I'm doing one called ELT Summit, which is also international, with our friend Eric Roth. And there's some other names like Nick Peachy's involved with that, so it should be pretty fun. And that's based out of India, so hopefully things are going better for people in India slowly every day, but it's hard to watch on the news a little bit.
It is really hard, yeah. All of our healing thoughts are with India.
Yeah, for sure. So today we're going to be talking about the next step. We're dealing with our Summer of SAMR, and I think we'll jump over there kind of before we get into too many explanations and breakdowns on everything.
So in episode 43, we covered, again, the first installment of Summer of SAMR. We talked about substitution and augmentation. And this time we're going to talk about modification. Mm-hmm. But first we wanted to recap on maybe why we separated the two and why we're only going to focus on one today, because we still have redefinition.
Yeah, that's right. So so there's 4 kind of steps to SAMR, and you can go back and do S and A from before. And then, so the way that this breaks down, Esol, is substitution and augmentation are kind of put into a little, a broader box category of enhancement, right? And so I think the way that you phrased it, I liked it, where you're saying this is kind of add-ons, or it's just little parts that make the project a little bit better, or actually, I mean, not necessarily better, right? The S is just a digital version of the analog thing, right? And then the A, the augmentation, as we talked about, that is like small add-ons, small adjustments, things that make it a little bit more functional or powerful in some ways, right? But those are considered in this category of enhancement, right? So it's like, hey, it's just enhanced. It's not necessarily a different thing. But then when we switch over to M and R, those are the second category of transformation, where you start saying, hey, hold on a second. This is stuff you couldn't really do without technology. Right? There has to be some technology inside of here. And so we thought, hey, let's talk about that for a bit, kind of get our heads wrapped around there. And then today we're only going to focus on M. Today's episode might be a little shorter, which is fine because it's summer and we want people to breathe. And we want people to think about those a little bit. But we're going to talk about that a bit. So kind of going into that transformation, we're thinking about, hey, what does that look like when we're saying, okay, now we kind of have our sense of like what it looks like to do something digitally. We all are familiar with things like spell check, right? Those are our augmentation choices that you can't really do on a piece of paper, but you could still go, check in a dictionary or something. So this is much, much easier to have the spell check. But now we're talking about things like the M today in particular, and moving into this idea of transformation.
Right. And I like to think about it sort of like the Tesla, where it's a completely different thing, and you couldn't do certain things before without the new technology in it. That's how I think about it.
Tell me about the Tesla. Hold on a second. What are you thinking of? What can you do with the Tesla that you can't do with the car?
Well, you need gas. You need gasoline for if you have a regular Honda Civic like I do, and that you can have your enhancements in that car. But then you move over to a Tesla, and now if you are stuck in a snowstorm like we were in Texas a few months ago, you could charge your devices when everybody else was stuck without electricity. You have that car.
Not to mention this favorite thing in Southern California, you can just sleep in your car while you're cruising down the freeway.
And you could not have done that on a regular gas-powered vehicle.
No.
Not even if you had you couldn't.
I don't know if we're selling people on this right now.
No, we should have. Sorry, I'm thinking California, Tesla.
Yeah.
But Tesla, that's what I think in terms of transformation.
No, that makes sense though. I get that. So so we're really starting to make that shift into things. Now, I do want to talk a little bit. I think that there's this important point inside of here when you're making that shift into the transformation stage. We still need to keep in mind, and I see a lot of this, even when we're doing research on this episode and kind of trying to put together ideas, I see a lot of people still making the mistakes as saying like, the goal is to get to M and to R, right, all of the time. And it's like, I don't want to.
It's not right.
Yeah. And I want to keep kind of encouraging people that we're looking at things inside of a zone from one area to the other. It's kind of like you're grayscaled from white to black, and you need white sometimes and you need black in other times, and you need to use different shades of grays at different times for those too, right? When you're putting together your sketchings, your charcoal sketchings.
it's not linear, and because we call it a ladder, we tend to think of it that way, right? So going back to modification, a modification is where the tech tool directly replaces a non-tech tool. The task is redesigned, and it encourages collaboration among students. Now, it's also important to note that this step also includes the previous features of both substitution and augmentation. But what's different here is that now the task begins to transform into something that was not possible without the tech tool. And when I say that, like you said, there are gray areas. And here we talked earlier about how there could be a gray area here when it comes to how much redesign becomes significant redesign,
Mm-hmm.
and that, kind of crosses over into redefinition, which we'll talk about in a future episode.
Yeah. And I also I just want to encourage people when they're doing these things. It's meant to help us to think about the way that we're putting our lessons together, or the ideas of like how we're interacting with our students, right? And so it's not that, I better make this lesson an M lesson, or I better make this lesson an R lesson, right? But we could say, for example, you know what? All I'm really doing with this assignment is having them do some of our friends have the big freaking packets thing, right? Like, it's just like, okay, it's just digital worksheets, right? That's just pure straight up substitution. So can you think of ways to make this a little bit more interesting for the students, a little bit more modern, right? Can you turn this into a hyperdoc that has links out to other things? Can you turn this into an interactive document that lets people share a little bit and work together on the same thing, right? And so, and maybe not even from the same room, right? They could be across campus or across town.
Yeah, expanding your audience. That's transformational right there.
Yeah. And so all of these are kind of the ideas we want to start just letting ourselves, or allowing ourselves to say, hey, this is a way that maybe I could boost this, or maybe that boost is going to take too much effort from everybody and we just need to get this work done. So maybe I need to shift it back to an A level assignment, or even an S level assignment, right? And so I want to encourage anybody listening to not feel bound to, that there's an achievement goal at the top level of R or at the top level of M. I want to encourage you to say, like, if you're thinking and you're being thoughtful on your choices, it's probably an okay thing to do. So when we come back, we're going to do a quick little break. And then when we come back, we're going to continue looking at some specific examples and continuing from our S&A examples as well. So we can kind of jump forward from there. Esol, did you know that people can support the DIESOL podcast?
And how can they do that?
You're supposed to do it more commercially, like, no, what do you do? Right? All right, we're going to work on your showmanship here. You can support the show with your fingers. You can give us a review on your podcatcher, Apple Podcasts, or whichever podcast player you might be listening to. There's a bunch of different ones coming out now too. I don't know if you've seen these, Esol. There's tons of different ones coming out that are like socialize your podcast, which maybe is cool if there's not too many of them. So anyways, you can support the show with your fingers, or you can support the show with your pockets. We have a Patreon. Patreon at the $1 level, the $3 level, or the $6 level. If you want to support, we did our first kind of thing that's actually directly tied to that, which is the interview with Martine, the extra interview, which he had some really awesome answers to our questions. And so,
yeah, that was actually really cool. So check it out. If you're not a patron, I recommend that.
Yeah, if you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. We are still here for you. All right. Modification. So we're going to talk about some of these examples, right? So Esol, let's start with reading. Last time when we talked about S and A, we said, the basic idea of a reading, like a substitution level, would be reading a PDF, right? An augmentation would be reading with a dictionary function maybe built in, so you can kind of highlight a word and see what the word means right there. But now we want to kind of talk about the modification level. So we're saying, hey, there's some tools that really you cannot do these things. And the first one, I think you actually came up with this as an example, was Immersive Reader, because Immersive Reader can read along with you, and you can do collaborative reading on a shared document. So if you have the Google Chrome extension of the unofficial Immersive Reader thing, you can actually just click a button and it will read through it for you while you're reading, highlight every word at the same time as you're reading, and you can click on it. It will give you that dictionary definition, but it will also give you picture dictionary definitions. And you can also interact with other people through, or with other ways. Oh, and you can click on different buttons to get things like your, what's the part of speech, or what's the, all these different things built into it.
Word forms and all that fun stuff.
So that would be one big example of the modification in reading. Another possible one there is Nuella. So the Nuella has leveled readers. So do you use Nuella, Esol?
I used to in the past, but I haven't recently. And I know that they've really expanded what you can do with Nuella.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So you can do all of this stuff. It's got the leveled readers. So basically what happens with Nuella is, it starts off with an official news article, and then they rewrite it at like 4 or 5 different levels. And so you can read the same article at easier or harder levels. And so that tool built right in and automatically done for you, with the option for annotations and all of those types of things. That's pretty heavy reading stuff that would never really have existed before. Theoretically there are little ways to rewrite an article, but like over and over and over again, like without the technology, without some company out there doing this for you, that to me is a real modification in the way that we look at reading.
Yeah. So, in terms of writing, I think last time we mentioned that substitution and augmentation would be something like the Google Doc, but then with augmentation, you would have the ability to highlight and do the spell check or check dictionary. But now moving into modification, you could now have a Google Doc that's a collaborative document, right? And we talked about how this starts to transform the activity, whether it's a collaboration with another student or whether it's interaction with the teacher as the teacher is giving feedback, right, within that same document. And it's happening live. Another tool I like to use that it's been a lifesaver for me right now that I'm teaching a TOEFL class is, and I know we talked about it before, is Writable. Yeah. And Writable is another platform where you can type in, you can have an assignment, but now you can do peer reviews, and students must complete the peer review before going back and submitting to the teacher. So it actually paces it so that a student can't simply say, well, yeah, my friend looked at it. Right there, and there are rubrics, and the student checks off a checklist, so it's there embedded in the document.
And the back end technology all makes this possible, right?
Yeah, well, you couldn't have that. You would have to have other stuff. You would have to have a paper checklist or something else if you didn't have this platform or this tool. Another one that is a recent favorite is also a writing tool, Quill. And by the way, those are both free. Quill allows students to work together and choose different categories for writing complex and compound sentences. So you actually can focus in on different EL or language errors that they commonly do in writing, but you can do it with a partner and a student can still do it on their own, but you couldn't do this without that platform. It takes apart paragraphs, and then it allows students to take a look at the most commonly written sentence for that paragraph and what was a better way to write it. And so students can talk and discuss, and it won't let you move on until you've met one of the criteria for complex and compound sentences and other grammar points.
Yeah. So for me, I mostly live in this kind of the Google Docs with collaboration area now. Like that's big time. So like that's my zone, is like M writing Google Docs with collaboration.
This is all everything. Yeah. And the reason why I went over to Writable and Quill is because my students need a lot of very scaffolded tech introduction or support. And so Writable and Quill do that. Google Docs, I have students that have never really used a lot of technology, and it just takes there's a huge learning curve for them when it comes to Google Docs.
Yeah.
So something that's a little bit more scaffolded works for them and doesn't overwhelm them, because obviously I don't want to overwhelm them when we're doing a task, and otherwise that takes away from the goal.
Yeah, but that's a good point though, because let's notice that, right? It's not about necessarily the complexity of the technology that makes it the M level here, right? So you're saying, hey, this one's easier. It takes way less scaffolding. I can jump right into it. But both Google Docs, which maybe takes more time, or Writable or Quill, which maybe takes less time to get into it, they are still sitting in that kind of M zone because of these collaboration features. And so I think that's really valuable to recognize that it's not about how hard it is or about how complex it is, but it's about what purpose it's ultimately serving. And so I really like this M here modification level, because depending on what you have and what your students are able to work with, you can approach this in different ways. So let's jump over to listening. So listening here, one of the things that I like too about this modification level is the opportunity for student choice, right? And so in a traditional classroom, you kind of had to play the audio that they are going to listen to, or play the video that they're going to watch and listen to, right? But now with so many choices out there, you can say, hey, go find your own podcast that you want to listen to. Or you can say, jump on YouTube and go find a video that tells you about this, and then share it with your classmates, right? And so that type of thing is a big modification, where we might say, hey, yeah, you're still listening to something. You're still practicing your listening skills. Maybe you're listening for that R sound versus the L sound, or whatever it is that you're doing the activity for. But the student choice in like, hey, I happen to be interested in this, right? I like sports. I'm going to watch a little sports broadcast replay. Or I like anime. I'm going to watch a TV show with anime, and I can listen to the voices.
Or cooking shows.
Yeah, cooking shows, whatever it is, right? And so that student choice here gives a lot of opportunities.
Well, yeah, you're beginning to encourage that autonomy over their own learning. And I'm very big on that, because once they leave us, we hope that they'll transfer that skill over. And I think that modification, and once we move, into redefinition, it encourages all of that, or it instills that seed in the students' habits.
Yeah. And so another way to kind of deal with listening here that I thought might be interesting is comparing different audio sources with a peer. So this one, I haven't done this, but I think it might be fun to do, which is that you can have one student listen to a song, and then you can go find, well, you have to kind of do this in reverse order, but then the podcast Song Exploder that really breaks down a song and tells you what it's about and all of those things. So you could actually have one student listen to a song, and they could say, hey, this is what I think this song's about after having listened to it. And then you could have another person go to Song Exploder, which is a cool podcast that really breaks down the whole history of how a song was made and what's about, all these different things, right? And then that person can listen to that, and then you can have those two people talk to each other and say, what did you hear? And what did you interpret from the artistic song? And then what did you hear and what did you learn from the kind of mechanical breakdown of it in this podcast? And then you can compare what you heard from those two things, talking about the same ultimate source, but looking at it or listening to it in two different ways. So that would be something that wouldn't have been something you could have done before either.
So now, in terms of speaking, we're using an oldie but goodie. Comes up all the time. Flipgrid, right? Flipgrid. You have
poor old Flipgrid. Your creaky bones Flipgrid.
It's old. It's oldie to me. It's like, you haven't heard of Flipgrid? Why? But we know there's still audiences out there that may not have heard about it. Yeah. So Flipgrid, you've got now the speaking component where students can start collaborating and leave feedback, right? And not only that, but you can do things like play around with the screen, add stickers, or cover up your face if you're shy. The teacher can also leave comments for the students. You can have all sorts of uh, asynchronous class discussions via Flipgrid.
Yeah, that's right.
So it becomes like a community, right? And again, there's a lot of students can go back and re-record. So it's all of that is built into to the platform, which you couldn't. Well, I mean, you could do it with your regular phone recorder, but there's just so many more options.
Well, and I think the fact that it's all there in one place for you to access asynchronously as well at any time, that makes it also a modification level. I'm going to briefly plug my my Tesol blog post there too, because I talked about some of those ways that you can use some of those hidden functions inside of there. I'll also add in.
I'll have to link it.
We'll put it in the show notes, yeah. But I had a student in this semester right now, and we did a Flipgrid, and she straight up came back to me, and she's like, "Hey, hold on a second, where's my transcription? Because I want to read how well it's understanding me." And so another teacher in our program had taught her this, and she's like, so she was already looking forward to that, and I'm like, oh, it takes a little time for it to process, and it'll get there. So check back in a couple hours or something. But absolutely, like, for her, that's her speaking skill, right? So she's saying, I want to see if it understands me speaking it. And she's just straight up interacting with AI, right? That is a total, artificial intelligence understanding and processing. And of course, that would never have happened in the past, right? That's something that's totally new and different.
Yeah. And another tool that we have, I haven't used it in a while, but it's VoiceThread. I don't know if you've used the latest version, Brent.
Not the latest version.
Okay. So I assume there have maybe been additions to it, or maybe new features, especially since there's competition out there. But VoiceThread essentially also creates that where it's an asynchronous conversation, and you can leave comments, you can leave voice notes, and other people can reply asynchronously.
Yeah. So I think all of these things that, we talk a lot about the collaboration level in the M zone, but I think also maybe we could tie in asynchronous in here as well, right? Like, hey, you don't have to do things all at the same time in order to get this done, right? That never really would have existed before. So I like that.
Right.
Okay, so that's a few examples of things that you might start thinking about as you're shifting into M. I think there would be some people that would probably, if they're hardcore SAMR people, they might say, hey, I think you're talking about R in this, this one here. But let's not worry about it too much. Again, we're talking about kind of moving along that grayscale from some place to another, and there's no perfect spot one into the next. But I think next time around, we'll come back and we'll jump into R for our August episode. Oh, geez, we're already thinking forward to August, Esol. Are you ready?
I know. I don't know if I'm ready yet. I'm ready for summer to be over, even though it just started, but.
Well, it'll end. It all ends.
It all ends. All right, it is time for our fun finds. And today I have an Instagram account. It is Grow with Guri, Guri. He is a meditation teacher and meditation coach, transformational life coach, but he is really funny. I know that I've talked a lot about mindfulness and maintaining your sanity during the pandemic. And so this is how I found him. And he has a TikTok where he dances and he does like little encouraging bits for audiences out there. And I think he's up and coming. I think he's going to be huge. But check out his Instagram. He's got life tips, anxiety tips, all sorts of breathing exercises and other stuff. So Grow with Guri on Instagram.
Awesome. Okay. Sounds good. Mine is shampoo. So I'm taking the grooming stuff this time around. So
is this something I can use?
Maybe. So Duke Cannon is kind of like a manly brand, I guess. They kind of go into, like, hey, man stuff, right? But for many years, I have not really used shampoo. I use soap, right? And I just found out that this is like, Yeah, like the soap shampoo people are like they're
huge faux pas.
Apparently we're scorned. I had no idea, but I was always so I was always using Trader Joe's soap because it has like natural softeners in it, and some it's like the oil based soaps and whatever. So that's what I used to use. And then I was like, okay, I saw this one on Duke Cannon, and it's a shampoo puck, which is kind of the same thing. Basically, it's like a hard shampoo that you just scrub on your head, and then it turns into shampoo. But it's meant for shampoo, so it's meant for like whatever your head oil levels are. And so I got this one.
That's pretty cool.
It's nice, yeah. It's called Barrel Char. It's a really nice smell to it, and it lasts for a super long time. So it's a little bit expensive. I think it's like $10 or something like that, but it's supposed to last for like 175 washes or something, which is like half a year for $10 of shampoo.
$10 and hair product for men, that's nothing if you compare it to what they
I'm like, ooh, that's $10. That's a lot more than my $3 shampoo bar that I was buying before. But sorry, I didn't mean to be, kind of exclusionary.
I get it.
All right. So Duke Cannon shampoo puck, go check it out if you are so inclined.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. You could win a one-of-a-kind Diesel pin by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, and we haven't had one since March. So
yeah,
if you feel so inclined this summer
vacation, if you're just like lazing about on the couch, just flick your finger up and open the app, maybe if you don't mind.
And if you're giving us a shout out any other way, tag us on social media. We are everywhere.
Yeah, sure. We've got our Patreon again. We mentioned that before. So $1, $3, or $6 level, if it tickles your fancy.
And we may or may not be back on Clubhouse soon. We haven't scheduled anything, but check us out if you see the little pop-up saying that we're live, and we'll be sure to post that on social media. If we do schedule things.
Yeah, just go subscribe, right? It doesn't cost anything to subscribe. And so just go look, and if we happen to show up, then we show up. Cool. All right. So, show notes and other episodes, you can go check us out. The show notes here are at diesel.org/45, the number 45. And of course, you can listen to us on VoiceEd Canada, voiced.ca. You can find the show. We are on Twitter. The show is at DieselPod, and I am at Brent G. Warner.
I'm Esol at ixy_pixie. That's IXY_PIXY. In Punjabi, thank you is Dhanyavad. Dhanyavad for tuning in to the Diesel podcast.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.